Flamengo, Flamengo, Flamingo. What up, how's it going, and welcome back for another video. Today, we are going to be talking about play-ins day number 2. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to talk about today. I was more excited about this day of play-ins than day number 1 and the other groups A and B. I was way more excited about groups, honestly just group D. I've been really excited to watch. I'm really excited to see Damwon and Flamengo play, Royal Youth as well. Group C is the most wide open group, honestly. We're gonna talk about Group D first and just kind of how the whole day went. I think that's what people want to talk about, Damwon and Flamengo and all that good stuff, and Royal Youth as well. I think that's what most people want to talk about. So we're going to talk about that group first, and then we'll get on the Group C, which is honestly more of the wide open group. All right, looking at Group D, let's talk about how these games went. So Damwon played. Obviously, all the teams played each other today. Damwon did not disappoint. A lot of people are thinking a little bit that maybe they underperformed and stuff like that. I'll explain that in a little bit. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I do not think Damwon disappointed at all. And if you listen to the cooldown at the end of the day, they talk about it a lot. They're just ramping up, okay? I believe they're just ramping up, kind of getting their footing a little bit at Worlds. I think that it's super beneficial for Damwon to be in this group right now. But let's talk about that first game they played against Royal Youth, because a lot of people look at that game and think, wait, hey, Damwon looked pretty shaky. Royal Youth was hanging in there with them, going back and forth, and then eventually Damwon won the game. It's very important to look at the draft in that game and to look at to actually understand how that game played through. Honestly, what Damwon was doing that whole game, and if you looked at the draft and anything like that, they were holding out just for Nuguri to get his items. That's 100% what was happening in that game. They played around some mid plays. So they played around jungle mid in the early game. Didn't get huge advantages, and that's okay because you have that Vladimir who's just ramping up. It's very hard to make plays around their top side when it was Vlad versus Renekton. This was just a farming matchup, so that's why not a lot of things happened. And it moved a lot more slower, which everybody going into the tournament was like, man, Damwon plays fast. Damwon plays loose. Unlike the traditional Korean style, which by the way, the SKT also plays very fast in the early game if you watched their playoffs. So don't be blinded by that weird Korean bias, weird stuff. But that game did go a lot slower. It was really based on the draft and what they picked. So their win condition was honestly solely looking for those mid to late game team fights after Vlad has his items. So it was a little slow there. There is some credence to people talking about, hey, maybe they're a little bit exposed in their bottom lane. Maybe their bottom lane is exposed that you can actually attack that lane. Yes. They've always been like that. That's how Damwon's always been. Their bottom lane is definitely the weak point of their team. They most likely have a better bottom lane than anybody in the tournament, except for anybody in the play, except for possibly Flamengo. Flamengo's bottom lane was playing great today, so that is a strong point of their team. But honestly, looking at play-ins, it is a sure for Damwon's getting through. If they didn't get through, it would be a huge shocker, and I think it's almost 100% certain that they're going to get first place. They just have to win one game, and they would just have to win one game in the next day that they play, unless they were to lose to Flamengo and then Flamengo beat Royal Youth, and they would have to go to a tiebreaker. But it's highly unlikely that Damwon doesn't get first place, and it's almost a certainty that they get through. So I'm about 99% certain, because you can't be completely certain, but I'm about 99% certain they get first place in this group and they don't drop a game. It is possible for them to drop a game, but not looking likely. Yeah, if you came into this tournament and think that they're going to hard smurf in every single lane, then you probably haven't watched a lot of Damwon. When you watch SKT play against Damwon, when you watch Kingzone play against Damwon, their bottom lane gets exposed. It's not that their bottom lane's bad, it's not the strong point of their team. And they play a lot more away from their bottom lane. They do a lot of mid-jungle stuff. They do a lot of top jungle stuff. If they have the appropriate matchups. And you look at the second game that Damwon played today, whenever they played against Flamengo, they had a top laner that is strong in the early game, that has strong gank assist, and you saw the jungle play around that top side and kind of blew up the map immediately into the game. Also, Flamengo picked Aatrox into 2 possible lane matchups that are bad. We'll talk more about that in a minute when we talk about Flamengo, but that position that they picked Aatrox in was so bad, dude. It was so bad. They picked him as a weak side top laner, and it was so easy to punish. It was had 2 bad matchups. The Rise matchup is okay in the laning phase, but you get way outscaled. And in the Renekton matchup, that matchup got so much harder since the nerfs to Aatrox, and especially when you pick a Caitlyn bottom lane and you know that you want to split map bottom side in order to push your advantage with the Caitlyn. And then you pick Aatrox as your weak side top laner. It's so bad. That was honestly so bad. But we'll leave that topic when we talk about Flamengo. But if you're worried about Damwon, don't be worried about Damwon. They're looking forward to the actual group stage, and they're just ramping up. I have always been of the opinion I don't think they're actually like a top 5 team at Worlds. They are a very good team, and they're the best team in plans, no doubt in my mind. But there are ways to attack this team, and you can just go back and watch whenever they played SKT, and just watch that series. They got completely neutralized in the mid lane, and got completely neutralized in the mid lane with the mid jungle synergy of Quid and Faker. There was a little bit of back and forth with that, but they had no way of dealing with Teddy in that series, dealing with the bottom lane matchup, other than to pick Karma, and then as soon as Karma was banned, then no way of dealing with that. Yeah, so if you have any issues with that, just go back and watch that series. There's a lot of weaknesses to this team, and there's ways that you can get in, but none of the play-in teams are going to be able to do it. Just being 100% honest, none of the play-in teams are going to be able to actually get their way in on Damwon, and if they do, I'd be very, very, very surprised. Maybe a team can take a game off of them, but they're going to get first place in this group, and really not much to talk about that other than that. So anyway, feel free to flame me about that if they lose the next 2 games, but highly doubt that. All right, cool. Let's talk about Flamengo. All right, so in their 2 games, the Damwon game, we're going to talk about that first. That was their first match. That draft was just, whenever they locked in Aatrox, I was like, you're locking in Aatrox, and the other solos already shown there was Aatrox, or it was Renekton, which is a very bad matchup, especially with the nerfs, and Rise, which is already not a very good matchup. But if you're the good Aatrox player, you can play through it actually. But you do get outscaled in that matchup, and you pick Aatrox for scaling. So in the scaling and the team fighting, but you get hard outscaled in the side lane. And then it makes it so easy for the enemy to run a 1-3-1 on you, because you can't actually match up against Renekton or Rise once laning phase is over. Even if you get out of laning phase, you can't actually match in the side lane. So the Aatrox pick was so bad. I've been saying, even when Aatrox was like OP, I've been saying for a long time, and you can go back to when I did the patch 9.18, when I did those notes. I talked about it then as well. So this isn't just like me seeing this game and now coming to this realization. I've been talking about this for a long time. The Aatrox is one of the most overrated picks ever. Obviously, you look and you just see like Aatrox just popping off in team fights and doing this crazy stuff. Yes, that's awesome. And if you can get to there, great, cool. You did it. You're playing Aatrox, and you got there, and you're doing team fights. But unless you're a good Aatrox player, unless you're a very good Aatrox player, I even thought before the nerfs, it was very difficult to even get out of lane and to see effectiveness. Every single time you see Aatrox locked in, it never does anything because it never gets out of the laning phase, and the game is already boom after that. If the enemy team has a strong top jungle, it is almost impossible to get anything done on the Aatrox. This was pre-nerf, and it was getting picked like every single game. But as I said, if you're a good Aatrox player, let's say you're a player like Buipo, and you can actually navigate the laning phase and get to that mid-game fight and do the crazy stuff. Or you're like the Shy, who actually, they play the Shy as a strong side top laner when they play Aatrox, or they can play him as a weak side as well. But if you're players like that, then that are specialized in Aatrox, then awesome, cool. I think even after the nerfs, those players that specialize in Aatrox, I think it's still playable for them, but not nearly as strong. But after the nerfs, unless you're one of those guys who just really specialize in Aatrox, I think it is so hard to pick that. And even if this was Buipo or the Shy, I think they would have got dumpstered in this lane anyways. They maybe would have played the first part of the lane a little bit different instead of trying to push the lane, because it was pretty telegraphed what the enemy was doing. Even though they didn't have the ward on it, it was actually pretty telegraphed. But obviously hindsight is 2020. Anyways, the Aatrox pick was tragic, and that game just went so boom so fast, and there was no way to play the game. So there's not even like much to say about the rest of that game, because that game was so boom from level 1. Yeah, that game was so boom. Anyways, let's talk about their second game against Royal Youth. So the second game's Royal Youth was awesome, and they got the Draven pick. There's a lot of back and forth throughout that game. Flamengo definitely were on the front side of that majority of the time. And so they won that match, and that was a really awesome match to see. Flamengo got their picks, and they kind of had the lead, and they never let go of it. And it was actually a pretty clean closeout, given what was going on, given it being playing teams. Actually looked pretty promising in that closeout. But really, the main thing when you're talking about Flamengo and Royal Youth, what's really interesting is how they both played against Damwon. And Flamengo, I want to be really interested to see how they play against Damwon when they don't disrespect them in the draft and pick Aatrox when they already show other two solo laners and the game doesn't go boom at level 1. I'm really interested to see what happens in that game, and that'll be a really good test on how good Flamengo is in terms of the world's plans. Royal Youth had some good things going on in that Damwon game, but again, it had a little bit to do with the draft, that they were able to get some plays done in the early game. It was promising to see them getting those plays done in the early game, but a little bit was to the draft. The reason why Damwon wasn't punishing them is they didn't really have tools to punish until they got to, Vlad on 1.5 items, or he really had like one item and then like half of like 4 different items, and then they started to just full punish once they're at 40% CDR, and he had his death cap. I mean, that's just hashtag just Vlad things. So that'll be really interesting when Flamengo plays Damwon. Is going to be very interesting to me to see how good this team is. But everybody is really just looking forward to that Flamengo and Royal Youth match. But if Flamengo beat Damwon, then that's pretty much a death sentence for Royal Youth, because there's no way Damwon drops a game to both of them. And I don't think Damwon drops a game at all, but if Flamengo takes a game off of Damwon, then that's just a death sentence for Royal Youth, and that group's over. I do not think Flamengo is going to win, so I think it's really just going to come down to whenever Flamengo play Royal Youth again. So they play them again, and Royal Youth wins, they'll go to the tiebreaker. And I think it's completely reasonable to suggest that Royal Youth can come out of this group in second place rather than Flamengo. My picks for the group are not super sexy and not any like crazy stuff. It's going to be Damwon, number 1, no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind they're getting first place. And I believe Flamengo is going to be the second seed as well. They have shown they have a lot of good picks, and that game against the Damwon was really boom from level 1, and some draft errors when they picked the Aatrox was a big boom. So I won't hold that against them how poorly that game went. I'm very interested to see them play them again and actually get some okay matchups across the map and see how that game. Do I think they're going to win? No, but I think it'll be a good test to see how good their team actually is in terms of comparing them against actual group stage teams, because they really have a good shot at making it to the group stage, because they don't have to play Damwon in best of 5s if they get out of this. So yeah, so interested to see Flamengo play. That's going to be the most interesting stuff when they play Damwon, and then obviously when they play Royal Youth, because that'll decide that if Flamengo don't beat Damwon, then that'll decide. That'll really decide the group standings. That'll decide who comes out of the group or not. All right, let's talk about Group C. Group C is the less sexy of the two groups, if I may say so. It does have a little panache that it's using some fun words. It does have a little bit of panache that it's the group of life, the group that anybody can come out of, right? They're all 1-1 right now, and this is also the group that all the other teams are looking at like, oof, I can't wait until I get one of them to play in the knockout stage. So that's a weird way to make this group interesting. Let's talk about these teams real quick. I'm not going to spend as much time on this group that I spent on Group D. So yeah, but we're going to talk about it. Okay, let's talk about HKA. Okay, HKA were really promising in the game where they played Quinn. I believe that game was the game they were playing against Mega, because they beat Mega. Or wait, am I a dummy? Yeah, the game they beat Mega, and when they played, sorry. For a second in my mind, I was like trying to reroute that it was Loki. No, the game when they played Loki was when they played Tristana Syndra, and that's going to be really fun to talk about in a second. Okay, the game that HKA played against Mega, it was really, really cool to see them execute that difficult comp. So they had the triple AD carry comp. They had the Quinn, Xayah, Rakan, and Corki. I don't remember who their jungle was off the top of my head, but it's kind of irrelevant to what I'm talking about. So that composition, if you watch the playoffs in the LCK, you would have seen SKT run a similar comp. They just ran a comp with a Quinn that has a positive matchup that they can punish in, and then it spread out the map super well. Also, if you watched the LPL playoffs and you saw Uzi play it, he played it in a similar way, spreading out the map. It was really cool to see them able to actually execute that comp. So what you do with a Quinn comp is, one, you punish in lane, right? And then after you get out of lane, you really spread the map out and force the enemy team to try to make difficult decisions based on how Quinn can move around the map. You burn enemy teleport, and you just get around the map without having to have a summoner. So you just put the pressure on your enemy team, and if that comp gets ahead, you can really, really, really force your enemy to make some tough decisions if you're playing it correctly. And that's exactly what happened in the game. Mega was paralyzed by indecision because they couldn't stop Quinn in the side lane, and they couldn't commit to an objective. They were too scared to commit to an objective because Quinn would take their base, or Quinn would just fly back up, and then they would have a mana advantage. So it got so tough, and there was a point in the game where Mega ended up TPing their Renekton in, and the Quinn just flew up, and they chunked a lot of the people on Mega's team, and then they had to back off, and then Quinn just went back down there, and then Mega had no chance of doing it. The decision was taken away from them after they committed, and it didn't. After they like halfway committed, they didn't even full commit. Then they had no chance after that of even making any progress, and that game looked really good for HKA. They didn't play it perfectly, but the way they spread out the map when they got to the mid to late game, and causing Mega to just paralyze with indecision, it made HKA look very good, but it made Mega look very bad. Even though Mega has a win and they got it against Low-Key, and Low-Key beat HKA, that was really not a great look for Mega when you were watching that game and you were just seeing all the indecision, and just there was nobody on the team who was just thinking about, all right, what can we do and how do we make it happen? And it took so long that it finally got to a point where the decision was really just taken away from them, and they just slow lost the game. So yeah, I was impressed with HKA able to actually run that composition correctly. It wasn't perfect, but it looked pretty good, and so that was pretty impressive. Let's talk about Low-Key. So let's talk about Low-Key esports. Okay, so that game, they lost a game against Mega, so we'll talk about Mega with this. Mega had a great composition. They had the double global. I don't think anybody's ever getting Pantheon ever again. You guys can see what Pantheon will do in that game. That was a really, really sloppy game, but you can see the power of the Pantheon in the laning phase. Pantheon is crazy in lane, and then he can move all around the map. I thought the way Mega was making plays in the early game was really, really cool. And then the game got super sloppy and super sloppy, and Low-Key ended up getting a lead, but then Mega won a really, really interesting fight around the Baron pit. So I don't think that game looked good for either team, and I don't think Mega is ever getting Pantheon again. I don't think anybody's getting Pantheon. Maybe for the rest of the tournament, unless some new priority pick comes out and it allows Pantheon to get through the ban phase. So unlikely they get that pick again, and I really don't. Mega has to look the weakest of these three teams, but honestly, anything can happen. It's not like any of these teams are crazy good than the other ones, so anything could happen with Mega on the next in the next couple days. But if I had to pick a team that was the weakest in the group, I would pick Mega, just because HKA showed they can execute this weird. This more difficult composition, and then in the game when they were getting torched by Low-Key, it was honestly a little bit of some draft issues, and they were able to still hang in there for a minute until they got just full punished for the draft issues. But we'll talk about that game now. So let's talk about the game that was Low-Key versus HKA. Okay, something that I think is going to be super pivotal for in this tournament. And if you watch the actual show, watch the actual broadcast, Frost talks about this a lot, and I've been thinking this whole time. Okay, cast your mind back to Worlds last year, and what was the crazy thing that was super powerful in Worlds? It was flex picks, right? It was the Akali, Aatrox, Urgot, Lissandra, right? True flex picks. And if you weren't able to play those true flex picks, it was very difficult for you to win the game. And then you would have to find counter matchups and stuff like that to those things. All right, since then, Riot has been full-on nerfing flex picks. Been trying so hard to get flex picks out of the meta. All those champions were nerfed to where they're no longer flexes anymore, right? You can, but it's nothing like it was last year. Flex picks are so OP. It's so OP for your draft. It's so OP. And so that's been getting nerfed forever. And that you know, just look at Silas. They got those big nerfs that kind of basically took him out of the jungle, made him very difficult to jungle. So flex picks are just crazy powerful. And one of the true flex picks, if you're able to pull it off, is the Tristana and Syndra. And those are champions you don't want to ban, right? You don't want to spend a first round rotation ban on a Syndra or a Tristana. If you do that, then you're giving someone a Pantheon. You're giving somebody something like that. You're giving them, if they're a Yasuo player, you're giving them Gragas Yasuo, right? It's so hard to ban that out in the first phases of ban. And if you do, you're likely to give them a power pick or power combo, like you give them Zyra or Khan or something like that. It's very tough. If a team's able to actually truly flex those picks, it makes them very powerful. That's why G2 is actually, you know, before coming into the tournament, I really thought SKT is probably the best team in the tournament. I think they're the best team, but I really think the meta very much suits what G2's got going on because they can actually truly flex those picks. And Loki showed that they can actually truly flex the Tristana mid. The Syndra looked fine as well. The thing that was interesting is the double defensive item. So they went Banshees and Zhonya's. As far as watching the game, the Syndra looked fine, but that build setup, based on what the compositions were giving out, I'm just speaking from not knowing anything about the players and just looking from the outside. It kind of spoke a little bit to me that maybe he's slightly uncomfortable on the pick, that you want to double defensive items just so you can be, you know, a really like a CC bot and just let Tristana carry the game. Typically with mages, you don't see double defensive item, the Abyssal and the Zhonya, so I thought that was a little interesting. It did give her 40% CDR, but as far as looking at the game, it looked fine, so I'm just kind of drawing conclusions here. But as far as looking at the game, it looked like it was a true flex pick, and that's going to be a really powerful tool for low-key esports, because it's going to be very difficult to actually ban those champions out. If you do, it's likely you're going to give them a power pick over. So that's going to be really interesting. You'll have teams that aren't able to run that and aren't able to take that away in the draft, or you know you're not able to actually flex it. You just have to take Syndra early in the draft, and then you get counterpicked in the mid lane, and that's going to be tough as well. So I think that's really powerful for low-key. And they looked really good in that game where they actually got those flexes off and looked mechanically good when you were just watching the game. Like, it looked like they, you know, could hang with the best of them. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And HKA in that game, the reason why I said they were a little bit ran it down on draft, it was just they didn't have any ways of dealing with the enemy, and the Mordekaiser pick was very interesting. I thought that, like, I think Mordekaiser's good. I think he's a very good top laner, and he brings a lot to a team. Like, he can, you know, he can pull the jungler out of a fight, out of a Baron fight. They can pull the carry out of a fight. But when you're just looking at the game, when does he ever have the ability to fight anybody other than the jungle situation where you pull out the jungler, right? Then you can do that. But thinking about just the 1v1 matchup versus a gangplank, I don't know how you ever win that fight unless you have your slow items, which he didn't build. He built the Nashers for whatever reason. He wanted that increased CDR, which that's just a topic for a different day. Yeah, I don't know how you actually fight a gangplank. You pull him in, and he ults himself, and he just walks around until it's over. Or he kills you, right? He just outranges you, slows you, and then, or if he can't kill you, then he just outranges you, drops the ultimate on himself and run around. The only thing to say about that is if you ult him when he has his ultimate up, you can force out his ulti so it can't be on the rest of the map. That is like a thought process with that. Or if he doesn't have ultimate, maybe you possibly kill him. But the build was very interesting. He built a Nashor's Tooth, which, if you don't know, Mordekaiser, he has a passive where his auto attacks do increase damage, so it makes sense theoretically, right? And the increased CDR is cool on Mordekaiser because the items you typically build on him don't give you CDR except for Zhonya's. So that's neat having extra casting on that, but I don't think it's the play. He was going against a comp that already outranges him, and he didn't build any of the slow items. He didn't build Gunblade, which you don't have to. He didn't build Gunblade. He didn't build the Rylays. It's so difficult to actually get on these people, and there's so many ways of dealing with Mordekaiser that he just kind of walks around and dies. So I really think that HKA kind of ran it down in that draft. So if I had to pick a team that I think is the strongest team in this group, I would pick HKA, followed by Loki, followed by Mega. Honestly, any team could come out of this. I think it's very unlikely Mega gets first place, but any team could get second place. I think it's going to look how it already looks right now. I think it's going to be HKA, Loki, and then Mega. is not going to make it through if I had to make a prediction. But honestly, if Mega got second place, it wouldn't surprise me at all. If they got first place, it would surprise me. They haven't really shown anything, honestly, any like strong, anything that tells me they're a good team. They've done some stuff that told me they're an okay team, right? But nothing that's really shown me like, wow, this team, wow, they really smurfed on that. Like how low-key flexed their picks correctly and actually played that comp right. I'm like, wow, they really smurfed this game. This was nice. I mean, it wasn't an easy draft win, but and then the way HKA ran that hard to execute comp, I was like, wow, they're doing really good. This is really awesome. So, anyways, that is my thoughts on Group C and Group D. I'm very excited when they play again. Sorry, that was kind of weird. I'm just having a good time. But hey, thank you so much for watching. Nobody's still here at the end of the video. People only watch the video for about 8 minutes long, if they even watch. But if you did make it here, you're the real MVP. Rest in peace, MVP. They'll be back in LCK 2021. Actually, I don't even know if they're still an organization. But rest in peace, MVP. Rest in peace, Jennair. You guys know who you are. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for coming back to the show. We're going to be doing this every day. Every day of Worlds. It's going to be exciting. So thank you so much if you came by. For real, it means a lot. But we're going to end this video now because it is dragging on. So I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. Bye.